Hey everyone, welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to take advantage of one of the most powerful DNS control panels in the industry. To begin with, I'm logged into the client area for a domain name that we want to go ahead and edit. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Domains from the menu, then My Domains. This will show a list of all the domain names in your account. In this case, I want to go ahead and work with this domain name here called atomicgenes.com. Over to the right, I want to click on the button itself, titled Manage Domain. Try to avoid clicking on this down arrow here. Instead, just go ahead and click on the button. When we do that, we're taken to another page titled Managing, in this case, atomicgenes.com. You'll see a tab here titled Name Servers. If we click on Name Servers, we want to make sure that the domain is pointing to our default name servers, and those are dns1.name-services.com through dns5.name-services.com. Now, a name server is sort of like a traffic cop. It dictates where people should get sent to if they want to either see your website or send you an email. So really on the internet, there's two things that we want to do with our domain name. One is redirect people to the IP address of a web server, and the other is to send everybody to either the IP address or address of an email server. So if you really think about it, a domain name is actually kind of useless. It's just a name. And it doesn't matter whether your domain name is google.com, microsoft.com, or your domain name. All domain names need to point to what's known as a DNS or name server, which means the same thing. But the best way to look at it is think of your DNS or name server as sort of like being the traffic cop that dictates ultimately where everybody should be sent to depending on the type of request. So if your domain name shows other name servers listed here, other than these, then the next step of this video won't apply to you. Instead, you'll need to contact the company that your domain name is pointing to, in other words, the DNS or name servers that your domain name is pointing to, and have them go ahead and do the following. So let's go ahead and get started. For the majority of you, your domain name is already and should be pointing to our name servers. To manage those name servers, I'll click on the tab titled Management Tools, then Manage DNS. On your DNS management page, you'll see 4 columns. Let's go and talk about host names just for a moment. A host name is anything that precedes a domain name. A classic example of a host name is a stupid www dot that so many people think they need to type in front of a domain name. In fact, since the day the internet was first conceived, you never needed to type in www dot in front of any domain name. In fact, it's a running joke. But because the majority of the people on this planet think you need to type in www dot in front of a domain name, you, as a domain name owner, need a provision for it. So let's focus our attention to this row here, the row with the @ symbol. This @ symbol represents what we call the root domain. So in other words, if anyone throughout the planet right now opened up a web browser and they went to http://atomicgenes.com without the www dot or anything else before the domain name, in other words, if they just went to the root domain by itself, then this row, the row with the @ symbol, takes over and dictates what should happen. In this case, we have everyone redirecting to this IP address here. And we're doing so in the form of an A address record. Now let's take a look at this row here, the row with the www host name. This row will dictate what would happen if somebody goes to www.atomicgenes.com, and they too are getting redirected to the same IP address. Take a look at this row with the asterisk character. This is a really neat feature of our DNS control panel. This asterisk character acts as a wildcard or a catch-all. So let's assume for a moment that somebody opened up a web browser and went to http://www, 4 W's by accident, .atomicgenes.com. If that were the case, then there is no host name called www, so the row with the asterisk character would then take over and dictate what would happen. In this case, they too get sent to the same IP address of the web server that's hosting the website for atomicgenes.com. Now, whenever you're pointing your domain name to an IP address, you want to make sure that the record type is an A address record. CNAME records are used for mail or for other purposes. We won't get into those in this tutorial, but you'll be able to create those in the event your web hosting provider requests that you do so. Down here we have what's known as MX records, and these apply to only mail. So really, what this DNS server is doing, if you think about it, it's redirecting people to both a web server and to an email server, depending on the request. Here at the bottom, you'll see a host name called hosting, which is redirecting in the form of a URL redirect over to another web address. So whenever you're redirecting to another domain name, another web address, let's assume perhaps you had the .net of a domain name as well as a .com, then for the .net, you want to go ahead and change these three rows here, the row with the www, @ and asterisk character, to be URL redirect over to the web address of your .com. While we're on the subject of redirects, let's go ahead and scroll down to the bottom and we'll create a new host name called test. And in this case, we want it to be a URL redirect. And let's redirect everyone to cnn.com. Now, one of the neat things about this control panel is you don't need to put in the http://. You could just leave it the domain name. I'll go ahead and click Save Changes. Let's scroll down and make sure that our new host name is there. So here we have test, in other words, test.atomicgenes.com would then redirect over to CNN. Let's give it a shot. I'll open up a new tab in my browser. I'll go to http://test.atomicgenes.com. Let's press enter and see what happens. And sure enough, we're taken to CNN's website, but take a look at the top here. It shows cnn.com. Now, what if we wanted to do something a little bit different? What if we wanted to redirect everyone to cnn.com, but we wanted to hide or cloak the true web address of where the customer's been or the end user is being forwarded to, and instead keep our host name and domain name at the top of the end user's browser? If that were the case, we simply change the record type to a URL frame. Let's go ahead and click Save Changes and see what happens. I'll then go back to this tab that I had opened before, and let's go ahead and change this web address to be test.atomicgenes.com again. Notice that we're still taken to CNN, but look at the web address at the top of the browser. It remains our host name dot whatever our domain name is, in this case, test.atomicgenes.com. Now, this may be very useful to a lot of you if you have perhaps another domain name. For example, you may be a real estate broker and you work for Coldwell Banker and they gave you a web address of coldwellbanker.com/something/something. If you have your own domain name, you could change these three rows here. Instead of redirecting to the IP address of their web server, you could change this to a URL frame as the record type for these rows, www @ and asterisk character, to be URL frames redirecting to whatever long, funky web address your perhaps real estate broker gave you. So those are some of the cool functions of this DNS control panel. The beauty of having your domain name pointing to our DNS or name servers is that it puts you in control. It puts you in the driver's seat. One of the really, really neat things about our control panel is also that we propagate instantly. You know, if you're playing around with host names, if you're testing things out, you may negatively cache your own browser, in which case you need to go flush the browser cache or the browser history and then retry it. But ultimately, this DNS or name server updates immediately. Unlike other companies that take 24, 48 hours or longer to propagate, it's done immediately upon clicking Save Changes. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please be sure to open up a ticket from our website or from within your client area. Again, thank you for choosing Registrar.com, and please let us know if we could be of any assistance. Thanks for watching.